Welcome ladies and gentlemen, my name is Dychronic here on this Destiny 2 video, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Xur's locations, random rolls, my recommendations, all for June 11th, 2021. You can find him in his regular spot in the tower. Just head over to the courtyard and make your way into the top left section of the hangar. You can find him right here at the edge of the precipice. I couldn't help myself. He's always at a precipice. Anyways, this is a high overview. Guess this is all you cared about. First up today, we have the Jade Rabbit Heavy Rocket Launcher. Now, this weapon is a bit of a weird one, because when it comes to damage testing, I believe a couple seasons ago it was really poor, and last season it was okay, just mostly because rockets are doing really well in general, and the fact is, it also fires 2 rockets at once. Definitely is something that perhaps a lot of people are overlooking. However, I do still think that there are better options, especially considering that Truth's out there with 3 in the tube, and it just ends up doing more DPS. And this is an exotic. If you've never heard of it, it shoots 2 rockets, 1 void and 1 solar, that can track onto the same target, and the void rocket suppresses enemies, and the solar rocket causes damage over time. And suppresses means that they're a little bit disoriented, they can't use their abilities, stuff like that. In general, this sounds pretty cool, but it's a bit unwieldy, and it's actually slower than 40 rounds per minute, because you do have to fire 2 rockets and wait for both of them to exit the tube before you can actually reload and get the next one. But more than that, it's just not exotic enough to make you want to use an exotic slot. Other things like the Truth, Lament, Ariana's Vow, Witherhoard just seem to have a better option for exotic these days. But definitely not something you should overlook. It's kind of a fun one. Moving on to the Hunter exotic today with the Stompies. Probably the best option on sale today. Ooh, that total stat's pretty bad though. If you've never heard of it, it's one of the best Hunter exotics in the game. Extremely powerful for PvP, allowing you to sprint faster, slide farther and faster, and then of course all of your jumps are a lot more violent and a lot higher. This is either very useful in PvE for jump puzzles, staying alive without falling into holes, or in PvP, going faster in any direction is always a huge advantage. And I say this in every single one of my top 10s, and it's always true. Going faster is always a top tier exotic. It doesn't seem like it would on paper, but it really is. When it comes to the total stats, we have 59, and that's really, really low. I think we got an exotic recently, like a Titan exotic that was like 68 or 69 straight from the Xur, so there are definitely better options when it comes to total stats, and of course, you always want to have a higher recovery. It's just not a great roll for this particular exotic. And yeah, it has a few ornaments as well. For the Titan exotic, actually a much worse exotic, we have the Severance Enclosure. However, I think they did change it, so it's not just the light-powered melees, now it also includes stasis. So if you want to trigger an explosion around you whenever you powered melee final blow an enemy, or you finish an enemy, this is an exotic that does that. However, it's one of the scenarios that whenever you're going in to punch an enemy, it's usually in an activity that's not as high level, otherwise you die, and then in a higher level activity, usually you're finishing enemies at the end of a fight. I just don't see when I'd want this. And from my experience in PvP, it's not really that big or damaging. However, it would be kind of cool if it was like Warmind Cell-esque, huh? Go in there with like a shoulder charge and just kill everything. Yeah, that's probably why they didn't do it. Although, you know, the Warlock version, the Felwinters actually got a big buff that it's actually the target that you do it at. So these are not completely useless these days, because the Warlock one is pretty great. This one's pretty bad, and then the total stats it's also pretty bad. And finally, for the Warlock exotic, we have the Chromatic Fire, a very fun and I would say gimmicky exotic that allows your kinetic weapon to have an explosion, a dragonfly explosion, based on the color of your subclass. So if you're using, for example, solar, you can get solar explosions on, for example, your Hawkmoon, which works really well with the Warmind Cell stuff, which is really nice to see. So it's definitely one of those things that you can use in certain builds if you need to do the Warmind Cell condition stuff for the combination of blah, 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 but in the end, you can just find yourself like a solar dragonfly weapon, especially with so many fireflies these days on the VOG weapons. Doesn't seem like it has much point. As far as the roll goes, actually pretty high total stats of 64, has recovery, it has unfortunately resilience, but maybe you want to pull this in PvP, I don't know. Overall, it's a decent roll for an exotic that's perhaps just more of a gimmick and fun exotic. And I believe it has a pretty sick ornament too. Yeah, look at it go. And of course, outside of that, make sure you're picking up your exotic ciphers that'll give you the ability to get an exotic cipher every single week for doing strikes and Crucible and Gambit, and it's pretty much free. You can either spend it on the exotic archive or on one of these exotic engrams. And if you don't know, an exotic engram, literally any exotic engram, unless it's a specific one, is guaranteed to give you an exotic that you've never received before, and it's going to be a higher stat roll. And when you get to the end game, you're just going to be spamming these out the Xur so you can get really high stat roll armor. For example, recently I got this baby, which is a 69 base Ursa Furiosa with a very high base intellect and recovery, and it was beautiful. And it's all thanks to just spamming out the Xur every single time I see him. It takes a long time. It's not fun, but it does help. And of course, come check out my live streams that I have right after these Xur videos, as well as all the times you can see on screen right now. We're often doing open lobbies for Vaults of Glass. We're going to do some pinnacles and seasonal stuff, so come check it out. Twitch.tv/Dychronic, link in the description down below. And of course, I want to give a big thank you to my patrons on Patreon. Specifically, I want to give a big thank you to Medi Budu, Mom, Dad, Charles Williams, Dr. Strange, Joe Smith, Monte, and Halpin, Stu Bachman, Justin Ray, Raymond Jones, New Panther, Cole Sherm, Casey Reagan, and Badgie for the support. I know this list is a bit old, however, there are no new entries. There's some I just wanted to give some extra thanks to, just because honestly, like Patreon, you really are making a big difference and allowing me to do all the great stuff you like. Anyways, that's the end of it. Hope you guys did enjoy. My name is Dychronic, and I'll see you guys on the next one.